This is a regular work session of our City Council today. So for anybody who might be watching with the work sessions, our procedure is a little more informal than our regular business meetings. We generally do not make major decisions except to perhaps give instruction to staff. The main goal is just to have a discussion on the items on our agenda. There should be a copy if anybody does not have one and they're interested on the cart in the back. And we've got a few people on with us online who we'll be hearing from in a few minutes. Before we jump into the first item, which is public comment on anything on our agenda or not on our agenda, I just want to take a moment to thank Chief St. John, who held a press conference today with an update on the standoff that occurred on Birch Lane in the Heights on Saturday, and also report that Detective Mike Yarina, the officer who was shot, is in stable condition in the hospital, doing well, expected to make a full recovery is my understanding. So the details of that incident were described at that press conference. A copy of the video is available on the Billings Police Department Facebook page. So if anybody is interested, please watch that. The chief did a great job describing the details, and we wish Officer Urena the very best, and ask everybody to keep him and his family in their prayers. So with that, we'll jump into public comment on any items on our agenda tonight or not on our agenda. If you would like to comment, please come to the podium, and just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Do we have any public comment before we move to first item up? I don't see any, and there's nobody online, so we'll close the public comment period. And I'll turn it over to our city administrator, Chris, in case you had anything else, whether it's on our agenda or not. And then I'll ask you to introduce our federal lobbyists and introduce item number one.
I do have, Mayor and Council, just one item. As you recall, we did extend the public comment period for the federal grant program that was talked about a week ago. I think of the staff recommendation to me, and is supported in looking at the comments we received, don't change anything, I think, relative to needing to hold that public hearing again. So you had some of it in the packet Friday, actually might have been Saturday morning. And anything that came in today will get forwarded to you. There was a comment as late as 3 o'clock this afternoon from a citizen just expressing what was probably the most common theme throughout all the feedback, which is our housing challenges in the community and an individual sharing their difficulties. So just to be clear, we won't need to change. We held up the council packet for next Monday. You don't have it in front of you or sent out yet because we wanted to let this time run. We'll get that out tomorrow, and it will not include an additional public hearing or any action for that home program. With that, then, I'm going to pivot, if that's okay, to our first agenda item this evening. So I want to thank Councilmember Owen, who helped us, about a year ago now, when we went through the request for proposal process, conducted interviews, and selected Thorn Run Partners to help us with lobbying services in DC. We've got Jim Davenport with us tonight. Greg Burns is a partner of his. He'll be jumping on. He's coming from another meeting. I just got off the phone with him. So Jim is going to kick us off. It's been really helpful this first year to lay the groundwork, have Jim and Greg help understand in our organization what our priorities are, as well as them really educating us on the activities in DC. And so rather than steal the thunder of what he's going to go through, he's got about 10 slides, I think 9 slides. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jim to kind of get us rolling.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, Jim and Greg, to Billings. I hope we didn't pay too much for your travel voucher here today. So But anyway, we'll turn it over to you. Welcome to Billings.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the Zoom and Teams has made life, I think, a bit easier. It's nice to be able to do these things and communicate with clients and do it at a city council meeting or a workshop. And you know, we certainly don't mind traveling, but we can do more meetings more often this way. Greg will be, as Chris said, Greg should be here momentarily. He was with another client, I believe, at a meeting, and was just trying to get back to his house. We did prepare a slideshow, so I think I have the ability to grab that on my screen. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, you should be able to.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Good. Very good. Okay. Can you all see that then?
We can, but we also are seeing the small slides down the side, so if you can just maximize your main slide. I don't know if we can turn up the volume a little bit. It's a little soft. We can hear you, but we'll work on turning up the volume on our end.
Okay, I will try to speak louder, and let me just go to slideshow, I think is what I want to do. Okay, how's that?
Perfect. There you go.
Okay, great. Again, my name is Jim Davenport. I'm a partner at Thorn Run Partners. What we thought we would do tonight, Greg and I have certainly had the opportunity to talk to Chris and meet with your staff and talk about your projects and your needs, but we haven't really had the chance to introduce ourselves to the City Council. So we wanted to do a bit of that, tell you a little bit about the firm. We also wanted to cover some things that have happened in Congress in the past year, well, really the last Congress, but then talk about moving forward in ways that we can work with the City Council and the city staff to really, you know, maximize what we're doing for the City of Billings. So I want to talk a little bit first about Thorn Run Partners. We're now, you know, we were founded in 2010. You know, a lot of the old lobbying firms have been around town here for many years. But I don't certainly want you to think we're a new firm because everybody that works at the firm has been lobbying for anywhere from 15, 20, or maybe longer years. We're basically a collection of partners and individuals from other lobbying firms. Chris Lamont and Andy Rosenberg started the firm in 2010 after both working at other larger lobbying firms. They wanted to do something a little different. They wanted to create a sort of a fresh, collaborative atmosphere. So they started to bring in partners laterally and individuals, part of our policy team, from other firms to build us up. So they started with 2 people in 2010, but we are now, I think we're actually 45 people 13 years later. And they, as I said too, they were a very small firm when they started, but we are now the 7th largest firm in DC by revenue. We're considered one of the top lobbyists by The Hill. We've been a top 15 standout firm by Bloomberg, and that's out of them reviewing over 2,000 firms in the city. So we are one of the fastest growing firms, and I think that speaks well to the people we bring in and the caliber of our policy team. And we've got right now about 245 clients. Most are in the corporate space, but Greg and I lead the local government practice. Our local government practice has more than a century of combined experience. Greg came from Van Scoyk Associates, and I came from a firm, Alcalde and Fay. Greg and I have been representing local governments since the late 90s, early 2000. So we were brought over to Thorn Run. It looks like Greg's getting on now. We were brought over to Thorn Run to really launch their local government practice. And at this point now, we have over 40 local governments from across the country, and you can see the states there. You are our first in Montana, and we're very proud to represent you. Greg and I have represented many of our local governments for 10, 15, 20 years. They have stuck with us over different administrations, different Congresses, different opportunities that have arisen through those years. And as a result, we've handled a wide variety of complex issues and projects for them. There's probably not one federal agency where Greg and I haven't set foot in. to work a project, and there's probably not one subject matter that we really haven't touched on for a local government client. We have had significant funding wins, but also large, impactful policy wins, and we can talk a little bit more about that. And we've got a great relationship on Capitol Hill. And, you know, you don't really hire someone like us to just work with your congressional delegation, your senators and your congressmen. But we also, you hire us because we've got outreach into the administration, both the federal agencies, but also other members of Congress and the committee staff. And that's really where we can help a city like yours establish relationships that you don't have at this point. And where Greg and I don't have relationships, we can lean on our colleagues. Our colleagues are, you know, bipartisan. They come from both sides of the aisle. And we have a very collaborative structure where we can ask people for help, and they can help us with either getting to a certain member of Congress or getting into an agency, maybe to meet with an official that we don't know. So that collaborative structure has really benefited us in our work. So more about the team. I've kind of talked a bit about this, right, as I maybe jumped ahead a little bit, but the partners at our firm, while they came from other firms, most of them were also senior staff for mostly senators and members of Congress, really in the senior positions. We have on hand as well the former Transportation and Infrastructure Staff Director, who's also part of our local government client team. We have people who have worked for federal agencies. So we've got really the ability to go in and talk to any federal agency on an issue. And as I said a moment ago, we've really got the ability to reach out to, you know, House and Senate leadership, committee chairs and ranking members, and various committee staff, because either if Greg and I are not working with them, somebody else on our team already has a relationship with them. So I have seen that Greg here has joined us. He must have run home from his dinner. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to him to continue.
Well, thanks, Jim. It's a good thing that we had it so that you were planning to do the initial portion of the conversation and then we follow up with the latter portion. It's good to be with you all tonight. I apologize for those of you that didn't notice. I was delayed because I was at an event this evening, and so it ran a little long. But I think one of the things that we want to touch on before we get into the work that we've done thus far on behalf of Billings is just to give you a little bit of a brief on where things have been and where they're headed from a congressional perspective. So, you know, the 117th Congress, which is the Congress that ended in December, actually was highly productive. And they were productive in a bipartisan fashion. All of these bills that you see referenced in front of you on this, this slide were all bipartisan accomplishments. So that includes the infrastructure law that certainly you've heard of a lot, but it includes a lot of other bills that maybe you've heard less about, like, for instance, the CHIPS Act, or they did pass a piece of bipartisan gun safety legislation, which was the first time they've worked on gun bills in at least 15, if not more, years. The only bill that was really sort of only passed by Democrats with no Republican votes was the Inflation Reduction Act. But what that means is that most of what, even under total Democratic control, that they were able to do was bipartisan. And we're going to need to see more of that in the future. And that's a theme that we'll talk about a little bit during this conversation. So next slide. So this slide highlights some of the things that we think are going to be most impactful, both from a broad perspective, but also on behalf of Billings, because there's a few things that are relevant and that do really sort of speak to broader issues that you all care about. So obviously, the first thing I think that's going to drive the initial conversation this year, and already has done so to some degree, is the debt ceiling issue. And you may not have heard a lot about that, but it is something that is going to probably this summer kind of consume Washington, for better or worse. And we won't get into a lot of detail as to what that all means and who cares about, you know, or the different sides of the issue. But it is something that's important and that Congress will spend a lot of time talking about, at least this year. Along with that, very close concert with that, is government funding, basically how to fund the government for fiscal year 24. So that fiscal year begins October 1 through the end of the next year. But it's going to be very closely tied with the debt ceiling conversation. And then, of course, oversight and investigations is going to be a big focal point this year. You've probably already seen in the news that there's been a little of that. We've seen some sort of more partisan investigations thus far that haven't had a lot of bipartisanship. But I do want to highlight that there's been one committee that thus far has been very bipartisan, and we expect to see a lot of substantive work from, and it actually gets to an item that's later on this little circular screen here that's related to China. So there's a select committee that's been created related to China. And again, it's an issue that is becoming more and more concerning for many people in Washington, and that's one of those oversight investigations things that will sort of keep along with that bipartisan approach. Two bills that have to be dealt with this year in one way or another are the Farm Bill and the FAA reauthorization, both of which actually you could argue have at least a tangential, if not more direct impact to Billings and the greater Montana region. So the Farm Bill is important for two reasons. One, obviously farm policy is important to the state of Montana, but it's also important from a nutrition perspective. So the Farm Bill is actually what authorizes the program that's known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. And that's a big part of the Farm Bill in terms of total spending. So again, that'll be a bill that Congress has to deal with that will be relevant to Montana as a whole, but also to some degree to Billings as well. FAA reauthorization, we mentioned that because the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, will have its authorization expire sometime this calendar year, probably the end of September. And that's important to the airport because there's a couple things going on, as you all know, obviously with respect to the airport and the construction projects, but there are some goals that the airport would like to see, for instance, that are achieved through that bill. One is known as passenger facility charges that would be helpful to increase those charges, and that could only be done through the FAA reauthorization. So again, that's a bill that's impactful to Billings. Of course, we also have the infrastructure law implementation. We are in year 2 of 5 of the infrastructure law. A lot of people don't recognize that this is a multi-year bill and not all the money comes out at once. So we have many, many opportunities in the future to seek funding on behalf of Billings through the infrastructure law. And of course, federal grant funding, I think, will continue to be of importance in 2023, not only through the infrastructure law, but just other programs that existed before and will exist in the future, as well as programs that were created by the Inflation Reduction Act that might offer some opportunities. And some of the other items that we have on here, again, I've already referenced China. Ukraine and Russia is going to continue to be an issue that's going to drive debate in Washington, probably of less relevance to the community, but certainly things that will be impactful in DC. So next slide. So in terms of what we've been doing on your behalf, obviously we got started sometime last year, and we spent a lot of time meeting with leadership and department heads to talk about different opportunities and challenges that they were facing. We really have focused primarily on understanding the financial needs and sort of the funding needs of various departments. But we've been trying to sort of cast a broad net. We've talked with Public Works, Police, Fire, Airport, Transit, and Parks. Certainly a lot of time with city management as well to try to better understand the community and understand how we can help deliver success for you all. We have engaged with the delegation on a number of key issues. I can think of things like the city's successful build grant, which was very slow, obviously, to work through the process of actually receiving the funds from DOT. We did engage with the delegation on that issue. We've engaged with the delegation on some issues related to potential Bureau of Reclamation funding. We've engaged with the delegation on a whole host of things. We've also facilitated some meetings with some federal agencies. I mentioned the Bureau of Reclamation and the ways that we have talked to your congressional delegation about our interests with respect to the Bureau and funding. We also have engaged with the Bureau directly and helped connect your city leadership team with some of these agencies. We've also set up some calls with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, particularly relating to fire department opportunities. So that's another area where we've focused. And of course, we're always focused on sort of what's going to be, what are opportunities going to look like in the future. So we are spending a lot of time talking about, where we might not have a fit today, could we have a fit in a year or two that will create some opportunities for you all. So in terms of what we think the next steps are and what we're hoping to still do on your behalf, obviously, we're going to continue working hard, engaging, like I said, not only with your team, but with federal agencies and with the city's congressional delegation and other folks in Congress. But we do intend to get out and visit with you all. That's something we have yet to be able to do. The end of the year was very busy for us, unfortunately, and we got started at some point where it became difficult for us to get out there. And then, of course, the beginning of the year is extremely busy. But we are entering a period where I think both Jim and I, for the first day in about a month or two, have been able to take a deep breath and kind of actually collect our thoughts. We're excited to begin to plan to come and visit with you all and get to see things firsthand. That'll be really important for us and help us do a better job ultimately of representing you. We obviously have a lot of upcoming opportunities. I mentioned we were in year 2 out of 5 of the infrastructure law. We are basically in year 0 of 5 of the Inflation Reduction Act. And of course, there's annual opportunities that have been around before that we want to prepare for. So they may focus on issues like public safety, or the BUILD program is now known as the RAISE program. So we're starting to talk with Public Works about what opportunities might be available via the new RAISE applications periods, and what kinds of projects you all may have that would fit well for that. We are also certainly keenly aware of transit opportunities. There's a lot of federal money that does come through transit. You all receive federal formula funding even for your transit system from the federal government. But are there other ways that we can help enhance that funding and get some competitive awards? And then, of course, earlier I mentioned the FAA reauthorization. Of course, you've got the major project going on at the airport. Is there more that we can do with respect to bringing home what's known as Airport Improvement Program funding, or driving change through the FAA reauthorization? And then last, I think it is important that we do investigate further legislative concerns and opportunities, because that is something that, you know, I certainly believe can drive a lot of benefit for a community. It's not as simple as saying, oh yes, we helped get that grant, but I believe that it's ultimately can be more impactful than, you know, federal funding received in, in sort of one award. So we do want to certainly dig into that. And with that, I think we've wrapped up our presentation, and we'd really like to answer any questions you may have and just have a dialogue. And we're really happy to be here with you all tonight. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Jim. We appreciate your efforts. Look forward to getting you here on site. Certainly agree there's nothing like being in person to meet people and kind of cement an understanding of a community. So look forward to being able to make that happen. Council, I'm going to turn it over to you to see if you've got some questions for Jim or for Greg. Where would you like to start? Just raise your hand. Councilmember Purington.
Thank you.
And maybe, Council, since neither Jim nor Greg really know us, when you ask your question, maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure. I'm Pam Purington. I'm with Ward 4. We have 5 wards in Billings, and I'm Ward 4. One of the concerns that I think is really paramount, not just to Billings, but to the state and across the nation, is mental health. You had it on one of your slides, but you didn't bring it up. I know there a lot goes into Medicaid, and some of those Medicaid dollars come from the feds before they reach our state, and then they kind of whittle down to us eventually. So I'm just wondering, what sort of mental health opportunities do you see? Thank you.
Maybe I'll kick that off, and then I can hand it off to Jim. We tend to do a good job of tag teaming. So one of us will start, say something that's at least half coherent, and then the other will finish it off and make us sound really good. Mental health is one of those things that I would say, along with like homelessness and affordable housing, that we hear about from almost every client. And so we know how critically important it is, and how it is just a nationwide challenge. We all sort of deal with it in one way or another on almost a daily basis now. Having said that, Jim and I are not actually super great experts at the moment in terms of mental health issues. There are not the most robust federal funding opportunities for that to direct to communities, and therefore Jim and I haven't had to become experts because we haven't had those opportunities to try to drive funds in a certain direction. However, I will say that we do have a colleague who is an absolute leader in with respect to mental health and has been sort of driving change on behalf of a variety of folks over the past several decades. And I wonder, and this is something I think we should talk about more with your leadership team, if maybe it would be beneficial to have a separate meeting where we could talk about some of these issues and bring our colleague in to the conversation so that she could share with you some of what she's worked on over the years and talk about the evolving landscape and where things are going. And then that might help you, from a local perspective, figure out and help us understand, how can we insert the city of Billings' voice into this conversation to help, drive further change. So that's one thought I would have. Jim, I don't know if you'd add anything.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Greg's talking about Catherine Finley, one of our partners and one of the original partners at the firm. She leads client teams at the firm in that space that you're talking about of mental health. She did do a briefing for another one of our city clients and did a very good job at explaining the lay of the land, both historically and where it's headed. As Greg said, neither he or I have ever been experts in that area, so I think, not to belabor this, it would be best if we probably set you up, and Chris, we could do this through you, set you up with a briefing, have Catherine do a briefing for you. But what I didn't say at the beginning of the presentation, the firm historically started with a healthcare practice. The original partners at the firm primarily were representing healthcare interests, and it's grown tremendously in that field. We're probably the top healthcare lobbying firm in the city, and you could see that just by looking at our list of clients in that space. But that's not Greg and me. So we will set you up, if we can, Councilwoman, with a briefing with Catherine and maybe take it from there.
Thank you. And just another follow-up, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you. One of the challenges that we had within our Public Works discussion a few months ago now was the 5G small cell towers. And I know that we visited with FCC regarding those. And to me, that just completely takes away the authority of local government. And I don't know if you have any knowledge of how that's moving through FCC as an NGO and dictating to local communities what they can and cannot do. Do you have any thoughts on that? Thank you.
We have followed that issue, and I think it would be best for us to, it's not been something that's been of primary interest to many of our clients over the past year or so. I felt like, so I think it'd be better if we renewed our engagement on that and found out where that things were headed. I know that the 5G issue is certainly of importance. The FCC basically allowing telecom companies to place these devices, at will throughout communities is a scary thing, and people don't understand what the impacts are. So let us get back to Chris on that as well, and we're all taking notes, I know, at the moment, so we'd be happy to get back with them on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you want to go ahead, Jim?
No, go for it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Neese?
Hi, I'm Kendra Shaw. I represent Ward 1, which includes the downtown in Billings. Since you brought up housing, I want to talk briefly about that. I know it's a very complex issue, but one of the issues we're seeing here is a real decrease in home ownership. We have a lot of people that just cannot get into the market at all, and as interest rates continue to climb, that makes it even harder and more difficult. We don't have a lot of local tools to deal with that. We rely on the state, we rely on, the federal government. Can you talk a little bit about anything coming down the pipe or anything that we can do to advance legislation in kind of that area? Because we'd love to see, yes, affordable housing is an issue, but we would love to also see people be able to get into the market and start building some equity, and seeing those numbers decrease is concerning. Thank you.
Yeah, that's another topic that we keep hearing more about. Our clients in California are facing it, certainly Florida. It's a challenging topic because I don't think the federal government really has solution at this point, but there was originally in the infrastructure bill, there was a huge housing component that fell out. It was going to be in there, and I don't know if you remember some of the history on the infrastructure bill, but it started as a very, very large bill. It got whittled down to maybe a third to a quarter of what they originally intended to do. The housing piece fell out along with some other things. There have been snippets of legislation that have been introduced in the House and the Senate to try and, both attack homelessness and affordable housing at the same time. We do have some information on that we can provide. There was something that just came across the wire I saw the other day on another housing bill. I think the challenge in this environment, and what I mean by this environment is the environment we currently have with a Republican House and a Democratic Senate, is getting more spending on a new program, I think is going to be challenging for the next 2 years. I think what we're going to find ourselves doing is protecting what's already there and not creating new stuff. So we will go back and look at the latest exchange on the housing information and give it to you. Greg, any more thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to mention one piece of legislation that was introduced last Congress that's been now reintroduced this Congress, and it was focused on providing down payment assistance to a variety of sort of public or first responder type people. It was like police and fire and teachers and maybe healthcare workers. So it was trying to sort of bridge a gap amongst some of those groups to help them achieve home ownership. So that might be a bill that's of interest, and we could certainly share that with you. And then if it were of interest, we could certainly let the delegation know that, this is something that you'd like to see move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome. My name's Roy Neese. I'm actually a member of Ward 2. There's actually 2 members per ward, so Jennifer Owen, you may have spoken to, so she and I are from the same ward. Also Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, as well as the chair of our legislative committee for our local legislation. Some of this was talked about as far as the housing, and like you say, we know it's a nationwide issue. We just recently heard some information about some federal funds, the ARPA home funds, and really what we were told is the regulations are so stiff on those that it really limited what the city, besides the dollar amount, the regulations on those were so hard that it kind of limited what we could do, so we had to kind of choose just one option. And so those type of things, I don't know what you can do as far as helping kind of loosen up some of those regulations would be very helpful, because we had some members of the HUD community say they could build up to 50 to 60 homes, but instead, we're not building those homes. We're using the funds for other things. And so I think it's because of those type of regulations, it's causing us not being able to use the funds and where we locally think are best. The other thing to consider is Billings. When you come out and see and visit Billings, you're going to find that, we're a community of 110,000 or so, but we serve, our community really is a 700,000 type community. We're not, we have farmlands and ranches outside of the community, so everyone drives to Billings for us. So when we look at funding requirements for what we actually provide for the community, one of the things, again, they mentioned is we got 1.2 million. We would love to have had, or we really should have needed at least 5 million. And so those are the type of things when you look at Billings, I think you'll see that you need to represent us as a larger city, because we really serve as a huge amount of people around us. Good to hear about the Build Grant. Looking forward to hearing what we can do more as far as the new RAISE program and how we can be involved in that. And then the homelessness and stuff, again, I think it's freeing up some of those regulations. If the feds are going to bring money here, let the local community kind of decide, how to spend those so we can actually do what we know is best in our community. Some of the comments, if you listen to our meetings, you'll hear from people who work with these type of funds. They said these are the kind of regulations they've never seen before, and they're very, very onerous on what needs to be done. But thank you for representing us, and look forward to meeting you when you come out here so you can see somehow. So I don't have any questions, just want to give you some insight into that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike Boyette, Ward 5, the West End. So at the end of the year, will we get like a report card or a scorecard kind of saying where you've been and what you've done on our behalf?
We're happy to provide
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
Certainly can, yes.
Thank you very much. I'll just make a comment, I guess. For many years, decades, the Land and Water Conservation Act has provided some relatively small dollars for park acquisition and development in our community. The program, when you receive funds, always comes with a condition that that property must remain in public hands and be used for those public purposes in perpetuity. That's a long time. And so, especially when these properties are not developed at the beginning, people really don't know what the future holds. One possibility, I'll just kind of mention it so you can keep it in the back of your head, is I've had some conversations with our congressional delegation about the possibility of trying to amend Land and Water Conservation Act to allow for the substitution of property, where you could get a waiver on existing properties from that condition, and as long as you substituted some other property of equal or greater value. That way the public policy goals have still been accomplished, but you allow for greater flexibility at the local level. So I just mentioned that. If you have other communities that might have a similar interest, maybe we could work together toward that policy change someday. Other thing, Councilor Member Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I'm very happy to meet you, Mr. Burns and Mr. Davenport. I'm Denise Joy, I represent Ward 3. It's kind of the Midtown area, if you can imagine that, farther away than the downtown, but not as far out as those guys down there. They're way out there. Anyway, this is a question. We are, very often we deal with federal funds that get passed through the state to us, where more regulation is imposed. So for the build grant, we had to come up with a matching grant. It's possible through that legislation that we could have been able to get that grant money without a match. Matching for a local community is really kind of difficult. And so I'd just like to put it on your radar that when the possibility of Amtrak passenger rail coming through Billings, the City Council didn't have the opportunity to get on board with our local authority. Instead, it went through the county. So I'd just like you to know that we're very interested in being on the route, the Hiawatha, I believe the name may be, very interested in having an opportunity for us as a community to have multimodal transportation, and if that included a passenger train from Amtrak, I think there are maybe different opinions on the council. It may not be unanimous, but I think broadly speaking, we're interested in having a thriving community, and if passenger rail could be part of that, we would be interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Feel free to comment.
Then maybe we could comment on just a few of these things, because you've hit on a couple things amongst the last, few of you that have spoken that have touched on things that we certainly have a lot of experience in, and I just want to reference them quickly. Amtrak, we've done a lot of work with Amtrak to help expand service in certain areas. That's something we should learn more about. We actually do have a client who has tried to do Land and Water Conservation Fund conversions, and we've worked pretty extensively with the National Park Service to try to facilitate those. I won't pretend that they're easy or that the National Park Service is very willing to do them, but we can certainly work on those issues. And then I think one council member, for instance, referenced how, you're a metropolitan hub for a much larger region, and that's really great to that's great context for us to understand. And I think we've actually probably said this to Chris as well, because he's described it very similarly. And I think we look forward to gaining that insight even further and experiencing that firsthand. But that's good to hear, and I thank you for bringing that up.
Very good. Anything else for our guests before we let them go? Okay, no one else is raising their hand. Jim and Greg, stick around for just a minute. We need to have public comment. If there is anybody here tonight who would like to comment on this item number 1, please come forward to the podium and just keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and your address. Is there any public comment? No one is online. No one is coming forward to the podium, so we'll close the public comment period on this item. And Jim, Greg, thanks for being here, so to speak. And we look forward to talking to you. A little more context. Politically, this group is a very diverse body, but we get along and we get things done. So we look forward to working with you. You may have problems, but we hope that we're not one of those problems. So look forward to working with you.
Thank you. And actually, I forgot to mention one thing, and I'm sorry, I want to bring this up. I'm sorry. We have a daily email that goes out to everyone throughout the firm and clients and whatnot. Some of you may find it useful. It's a snapshot of what's happening in Washington and on Capitol Hill. Some of your staff receive it on a daily basis, but it's possible that some of you all may also find use in it. So maybe if it's called the tip sheet, again, it comes out at about 8 o'clock your time in the morning. I think many of our clients find it really valuable. It can be a quick 5-second review to see whether Congress is not in or out or whatever they're doing, and give you a little bit more context on what the news of the day is in DC. But it might help spur some conversation between you all and us indirectly, because you might see something in there that you think, well, hey, we'd like to know more about that, or hey, we think we have an idea relating to this issue. So if any of you want to receive it, please let Chris know. We'll be happy to sign you up. And thanks for the opportunity to be with you tonight.
Thank you for mentioning that. I'm sure Chris will have a long list of council members and probably department heads as well. So thank you again, gentlemen. Good night.
Thank you all.
Take the rest of the day off there. Okay, that concludes item number 1 and brings us to item number 2, our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee update. Elise is our presenter tonight, our alternative modes coordinator. So turn it over to Elise.
Yeah, and I'm actually just here very briefly to turn it over to Anna O'Donnell and Christy Drake, who are our presenters from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee tonight. They come to you once a year with a presentation about what they've been working on, what they see as exciting opportunities ahead, some challenges. So I'll just go ahead and turn it right over to Anna and let her get started.
Thank you.
Good evening.
It doesn't sound like it.
There we go. Good evening, council and mayor. Thank you for having me up here. I haven't been up here for a while. I'll say konnichiwa. I just got back from Japan, so plug that out there. Okay. Yep, we are here for our annual report to give you a rundown of all the great things that we are doing at BPAC, which is the Billings Area Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Advisory Committee. So who we are. So the chair is Nikki Zimmer. She represents the county. I am the vice chair this year. I represent the city. Margie Bonner, it represents the city. Joan Shea, the county. Dave Kopic, the planning board. Christy Drake, city. And our new member, Jason Wood, represents the county. So we're very well-rounded. Right. Our focus, ensuring that our community's infrastructure enables people to walk, bike, or use a wheelchair safely within our community. What do? We advise city and county in regards to non-motorized transportation issues. We ensure advice is rooted in community need by soliciting and compiling public comment trends. We maintain relationships with governing bodies, including the Billings City Council and the Yellowstone County Commissioners. We use the Billings Area Bikeway and Trails Master Plan as guidance. The Billings Area Bikeway and Trail System Master Plan, when issues arise or need some advice, we collaborate with the city and county and partners to address those concerns, give our input and our feedback to find solutions. We review and accept public comment on non-motorized transportation needs. So what does that mean? Well, once a month, we have public meetings. We look at online comments, report from the city, county, and planning. We put a survey to get input from the public on issues facing Billings and Yellowstone County residents in regard to biking and walking. BPAC will also collect these survey responses for 3 months, and we'll use this list to prioritize the top issues for which we advocate and improve. So we ran that survey from November to about February-ish, and I think we accepted some just recently as well. And how did we promote that survey? Great question. We did it with the city with the help of Victoria. We put it on the Facebook. We also put it on the website. We worked with our partners, the Yellowstone Road Runners, Billings TrailNet. We shared it socially to get the word out. Public input and concerns. And this is is this yours? Oh, I thought he was, okay. I was like, sorry. Survey, public input and concerns. So survey results recently wrapped up, which we just talked about. We'll be reviewing results soon. We'll be reviewing them in our next BPAC meeting, seeing what the community is saying, some improvements, ways that we can address concerns from our community in areas of that they view as problems or problematic for mobility for our neighbors and community. Bike ped crash police reports. Discussing driver education and law enforcement is key to avoiding bike ped motorist conflict. We try to review these reports monthly, review trends, concerns, and how to address those within a safety manner, and also getting back to concerned citizens. Public comment. We always have public comment within our meetings. We encourage people to come to our meetings. I want to say right now, thank you for the council members that have taken time to come to our meetings, to help out, to discuss, to learn, or give us any kind of guidance or feedback. We really appreciate that. So public comment, trail signage, trail maintenance. Another huge one is, crosswalks and enforcement of crosswalk violators. Is what we see in terms of public input and concerns coming from our community. So I will pass this over to Christy Drake.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christy Drake. I'm not sure, do I need to give my address? 2950 Walden Place. Now wearing the BPAC hat, not Billings TrailNet hat. We do see that trail use continues to rise. And that is not surprising with I got the raw data from Elise about, from the BPAC survey that we got, and I think you would all find it very interesting. Bicycle lane usage in Billings also, well, it rose pretty well between 2017 and 2020. Now it's kind of leveling off a little bit, but it's risen slightly. And they still haven't completely compiled the 2021 data. But we do want to applaud the efforts of the, oh, come on. There we are. The city, the county, MDT, for their efforts in the past year and over the many years, but we know that active transportation continues to rise, as you can see with the data. The 2021 Safe Routes to School plan showed the need for further safety measures. Flashing pedestrian beacons were installed along Shiloh and at several intersections and mid-street crossings around the city, and that has helped, although we still hear people asking about the roundabouts and the safety about roundabouts, on Shiloh. The key trail connections that we've been excited about that have been built are the BBWA Canal Trail by Rose Park, the neighborhood bikeway between North Park and Rose Park, the 32nd Street Trail between King Avenue North or King Avenue and Gable Road, the Pioneer Park Trail system that was repaired, the bike lane on 5 Mile Road, and then, of course, the Billings Bypass Bridge that will be, that has a separated path included. So moving forward, our strategic projects are to finish up this public outreach campaign and get input and then also educate the public related to biking, walking, and rolling. Now these were our strategic priorities. We've accomplished several of these. So number one, we've kind of checked the box. Number two, find a partner organization to apply for recreational trails program grants and the Montana Trail Stewardship grants to build trails. That is a couple $1 million every year from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And a lot of communities have multiple grant applications coming from different organizations for for projects throughout their area. And so we wanted to make sure that our area is also submitting grant applications so we get a fair chunk of those funds. Billings TrailNet ended up being the partner organization. It makes sense, but I also happen to be on the State Trails Advisory Committee, so I have to recuse myself from voting on Billings things. But having another partner organization to apply for grants, I mean, there's so much money out there to receive, but it also requires a 20% match from our community. Also working with the city and county to strengthen or create an overarching policy to incorporate biking and walking in the design of the built environment. At this last meeting at BPAC, we discussed just that the Complete Streets policy is a really solid policy, and so that does a good job of making sure that our policies are strong. And then making recommendations to the Billings Area Bikeway and Trails Master Plan as it's updated soon. We want to make sure that you feel like you can come to us and that you feel like we are a valuable resource. So I've got data from the crashes that have happened since October. We plan to review this at our next meeting, have a map out there and start putting, dots where there are some problems that we can see. Also, from that survey that we did, we got 120 responses, and that was, of course, not just, talking to the choir. That was trying to really get the word out and get a wide swath of the community's input from that. So how to, I would love to know how we can share that information with you in a meaningful way at the right time. Then also, we just hope that you will recognize that there is broad support for bikeways and trails from the general public, from the health community, and from the business community. There we go. Recognize and support active transportation improvements happening in Billings and Yellowstone County, including non-motorized improvements, and increase collaboration with other governmental agencies like MDT and Yellowstone County. So, we're in this together, and if we can reach out to those other agencies and try to have a comprehensive plan or, effort to get this, the multimodal infrastructure in so that everybody can be comfortable and can get to where they need to be without being terrified that they're going to be hit. Not everybody has a car. We do hope that you'll review the data that we provide. We do suggest that we increase traffic enforcement for red light violators, distracted drivers, and impaired drivers. Did you? You're driving now? There we go. Okay. And then we are educating bicyclists and pedestrians to be consistent with signaling their intentions. And now for questions. Do you have any?
Very good. Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I kind of have a question, and maybe we have our complete streets policy, and one of the areas where you feel like maybe there's something more that you can do is there an overarching policy or something a little bit bigger than our complete streets? Am I understanding you correctly on that?
That was initially what our one of our strategic priorities was to get a bigger, stronger policy. But as we discussed it during a recent BPAC meeting, we thought, well, let's not fix what's not broken. And, this is a pretty solid policy. So do you feel that, is it okay to ask questions or of the council?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
He just wants to know if there are
Protocol.
specific changes or
Well,
improvements.
One of the things that kind of came to me at one point was Billings is a LEEDs Gold certified city, which is a huge accomplishment. And I know that in their area, and Councilmember Owen knows more about this because she was part of the Energy Commission at one time, that one of the things that they did as part of their review was to really look through all of our policies. And I think that our complete streets policy gave us a point. No, I can't say that. But I think that the city's commitment to a complete street policy is very important. And maybe that there are other ideas that the Energy Conservation Group actually worked with in terms of there are areas where we weren't very strong. And maybe there are areas where there could be some understanding of what LEED certified meant and areas where maybe we could do more to have those overarching policies that would create that infrastructure in the area of health and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Christie, thanks for bringing this tonight. I support trails quite a bit, and at the same time, I also support motorized vehicles. And so this is about the non-motorized, and so I just want to make sure that we, as you guys talk about this with the safety and things like that, we as motorized vehicles have to watch out for the non-motorized, and I think there's both ways. When I'm out and about driving on my bike, when I'm out near traffic, I typically signal if I'm doing and stuff like that. And so I'm old school, and I'm wondering if are you involved in the schools teaching kids, or are the kids taught how to ride their bikes and properly signal and things like that? Is there any kind of training that you're involved in to make sure to help minimize the safety? Because I never see people signal. I kind of feel like I'm the only one out there signaling when I'm out riding around in traffic.
Councilmember Neese, I think that's really important, and I know that I can see Elise on the side there, but we did, I think that this is a Kim trailer and Billings Public Schools collaboration, and maybe Elise would like to answer.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember. Yeah, so we have a program called Kids in Motion, or KIM for short. The main activity we do is we bring a bike repair trailer around to different SD2 schools to fix up their bikes. But there's also lesson plans included in that get sent to the health enhancement teachers ahead of those events, with the goal being that kids learn how to walk around their neighborhoods and ride their bikes safely to school. So that's something we're promoting through Kids in Motion.
Okay, Mayor, follow up on that?
Sure.
So do you know if is there any kind of bicycle, non-motorized education in driver's education that talks about this as well? Do you know if that's involved? Because if we want to start integrating motorized and non-motorized, we need to make sure those who are out there, both the motorized and non-motorized, are educated well. And so whether or not we have public service announcements through Public Works to do some of that, to make sure that they're using the streets right, and maybe that could be a way to educate, or through the school system or the state and the driver's ed education. Is, you know, if any of that is enforced or taught?
Yes, I actually spoke with, I think she was either the director or the assistant director of driver's ed over at the Lincoln Center, and she said definitely they teach about how to drive safely when you're near people who are biking and walking. I know she mentioned when Kelly Fulton was killed in Bozeman, she brought that up with her students, and like one of the lessons was like, read over this article, you know, what could have gone differently, how could this have been prevented? So I know that they are teaching that in driver's education.
And a follow-up, Councilmember Neese. Billings TrailNet has some public service announcements out there. Hopefully I know that Q2, Color 8, and KSVI have all said that they would be running them. And so that was just last month. So they should be, and it's that etiquette campaign that we started with in partnership with the Public Works Department back in 2015 or 16, still relevant today. They're filmed around Billings at, you know, key intersections where they've been identified as dangerous places. But, you know, I think that having more funds to actually, you know, put into advertising would be fine. But that was a campaign that we did that was really well researched and supported by the community.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Another question, if you don't mind. Okay. You mentioned the Fish and Wildlife Parks. Can you expound on that? Are you looking for us as a city to be a partner, or are you looking for someone to be a partner? And, or what do you mean by the Fish and Wildlife Parks?
Just that Fish, Wildlife, and Parks administers two grants. It's the Recreational Trails Program grant and also the Trail Stewardship Grant. One of the Recreational Trails Program grant comes from federal highway dollars, and they get a certain amount every year to distribute to communities around the state. And there's a grant process, and they're due like in January. And so many communities around the state apply for these funds. We're not asking city council to apply, but communities can apply from different organizations. You have to be either a nonprofit or a government organization or a tribal organization. And so that's what BPAC was trying to find, was another organization besides just the planning department and Billings TrailNet to try to apply for some grants.
So,
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, it does. It creates a follow-up. So the city can apply for these grants. Is that correct? And here's the reason I'm thinking about it, because Lake Elmo's Fish and Wildlife Parks, great recreation area. But if you try to walk along there, or drive your bike along there, it's very dangerous. And we can throw a missing sidewalk program in there, but that's state land. We can't do that. We can do it on the other side, but not on the state land side. So maybe the city could apply for a grant for that area and get some kind of safe route through there, because it's not safe when you ride your bike along there, around the outside at Lake Elmo there.
And there are a lot of grant applicants that are like the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service, a lot of those entities that are local also apply for those grants. So if we can have any of that, or the county, but at least, did you want to add?
No. Sorry, I hadn't heard yet where you were asking about, but we did apply for both the Montana Trail Stewardship Grant and the RTP grant this past grant cycle as a city. So we're waiting to hear if that was funded, and we applied for a trail in Rose Park. So.
Okay. I suppose because it is Fish and Wildlife Park land that's bordering, it may be more applicable to apply the grant there because it's their land. And it's the city, and the Public Works has to modify the road, and they'd be putting the sidewalk and stuff like that at the same time. So it would be helpful. I think that's an area you may want to focus on because it is very dangerous, and maybe the grant may be an easier grant to get because it's their property.
It's possible if someone from the local Fish, Wildlife, and Parks office would not mind applying for the grant.
Great. Okay.
Thank you. Good idea. Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you, Christy. You said something that sparked a thought for me. You said, help us help you be successful. And I immediately thought, we have conversations all the time about missing sidewalks, missing pieces in the city. Our funding for that is really reliant on, we can order in sidewalks, but the homeowner, the property owner is going to pay for it. And it always causes us heartburn when we see big numbers, and it's difficult for constituents, for the population to understand that that's your contribution to the sidewalk program in Billings. But we as a council haven't really had the ability to dig into that subject, and I feel like it seems like a perfect one for BPAC to really look at and maybe bring us back if there are any other options or solutions or what other communities do to accelerate this, because as we're trying to push a lot of that funding into safe routes to school, we'd love to see that happen faster, quicker rather than taking years and years. So I would just put that on your radar as a great topic, and one I would love to hear you guys come back with some detailed information for us. It would be very helpful.
Councilmember Shaw, thank you very much. That's noted, hopefully, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I have a question for whoever wants to answer it. Is BPAC or the planning department working on a next step on a bike share or scooter program? We developed a great plan here a year and a half ago, but didn't have a vendor who wanted to take it any farther. So I was wondering if anything is developing on that score, or whether there might be a grant program to help fund that, especially between downtown and the medical corridor and MSUB seems like a logical route.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yes, so since that study, we've actually had a couple of people approach us about wanting to bring more scooter share, but I think we can require some bikes to Billings. And so we've kind of been talking with them a little bit. I think the next step is to put out or kind of look at, do we want to put out a request for proposals to see if any of these companies want to come to Billings and kind of talk through that. So that's kind of where we are on that. Still no funding sources kind of popped up for it to be a locally funded option.
Okay, thank you. For other questions, Councilmember Parrington.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting your annual report. One of the concerns that I have with our roundabouts is that they do have those, the blinking lights, I don't know what they're called, for pedestrians, bicyclists. And what I have found is when they are set up, I know Debbie's gone. We'll tell her later.
Yeah.
But whenever they're set, I know she, you think, but when they're set up so close to the roundabout, the driver cannot see them. Plus, if you have someone coming around the roundabout, they can't see why you're stopping in the roundabout. So I just see, I wish they would put those lights someplace else for a crossover rather than in the roundabout or right at the roundabout. One of the things that I will also mention from former Councilman Ewald, he always wanted bike yields because bicyclists do not yield to cars when they're coming off of a sidewalk or they're coming out of an intersection, and the cars are the ones that are always supposed to yield. And guess who's going to win that battle? So I think that's part of bicycle safety. Or cars, you're looking kind of quizzical, like you don't know what I'm talking about. So, I mean, I don't know.
Councilmember Purinton, just a little bit of clarification on bicycle yields. Are you suggesting like a sign at certain locations that the bicyclist needs to yield to an automobile? And just looking for clarification on like what areas, kind of giving us some ideas about the scenario.
Whenever they're getting ready to come onto a major thoroughfare, I mean, I've seen it many times where they don't look or they're crossing a street. And I mean, I've seen it many times there on Rimrock, they're at Reberg. People would just keep driving on the sidewalk and they never look behind them, because you could have, well, they're not on the sidewalk, they're in the bike lane. So I just see it as, I guess I'm old school also, Roy. We were always told to watch out for cars. And now the cars have to watch out for the bicyclists. And the bicyclists aren't, a lot of them are not abiding by traffic laws. And that's what I see as a big issue. So I think safety programs are good, but I think also traffic laws are good for them to learn also. And it's not kids, more times than not, it's adults. So I guess that's my only thing.
Okay, Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And I would just suggest that you go to the National Transportation website. There are some actually really great videos about this particular issue. And I think the video was made in Boulder, Colorado, by people who are basically a trail net organization for that city. And they filmed their own members, how to enter a roundabout as a bicyclist, how to come off the sidewalk, and some things like that. And I think there's information out there, and maybe that's something that TrailNet or BPAC would like to do, which is make their own video, stick it on our website, and help educate our public how to enter as a bicyclist, how to exit, how to come off a sidewalk. And I think there's some really great videos out there, but it would be better if we made our own and had people watch our own videos of what they should and shouldn't do. So just a suggestion.
Okay, anything else, Council? Councilmember Neese?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. And when those videos are made, send them out to the task force so we can post them out there so we can get to make sure that all the neighborhoods see those. So that'd be great. I look forward to something like that.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, Council, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to public comment on this item. If anybody would like to comment, please come forward. You know the routine.
Jacqueline Garcia, Dorothy Lane. I just had a question, I guess. I know you guys are in charge of, you're in charge of all the walkways and where people can walk. The problem is Main Street. It is considered the transportation, not the city, Department of Transportation. So when you walk on it, there is nothing but gravel. And someone like me who's disabled, it's very, very slippery. Bench has horrible crosswalks. You could either cross down, I'm horrible, on Wicks, or go down all the way down to Hilltop, I believe it is. But there's nothing in between, so you have to walk all the way down there if you're walking with your kids. And I almost slipped and fell last week walking with my daughters to Walmart because we were using the sidewalk, and this gravel is so bad out there. Is there a way to work on that? Because I know it's not the city. I don't know who to take it to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chris, you want to comment how Department of Transportation can be asked to clean up their sidewalks?
So the place I would start would be, and frankly, maybe it's education, as with most things, it's asking property owners to be helpful. So if the sidewalk in front of your home or your business, sweeping that off, keeping it clear. The state does do street sweeping. We do street sweeping. Coming off of winter is always the worst when there's so much sand has been used. But that frankly, I think is the most effective way, is literally as property owners and asking respectfully, but frankly, sometimes reminding businesses, whether they're as corporate as a Walmart or a local store. I would really appreciate it if you had someone on your maintenance crew, sweeping off or making sure sidewalks are clear, whether it's summer, spring, winter, or fall.
Chris, if I can follow up on that, I've noticed the same problem on Grand Avenue here in the spring, especially. And it's great in concept for us to pass an ordinance that says the property owner is responsible to maintain their sidewalk. But the reality is, think of Grand Avenue, what you've got is, I'm making the numbers up, but 100 property owners on the north and 100 property owners on the south. And a chain is no stronger than its weakest link. And so even if 80% of the property owners did a pretty good job of that. Having problems along the 20% creates a big problem. And on this, and also shoveling. But I'm just wondering whether our community shouldn't look into a arterial, not all sidewalks, but arterial maintenance, sidewalk maintenance district that would run a sweeper. And they do make these small sweepers. I saw one, they're made by, I actually investigated the cost of them a couple months ago. The Karcher Corporation in Europe, and I saw them when we were in Switzerland between Christmas and New Year's. They're just little mini street sweepers, and they run down the sidewalk. So if you had one of those, you kept running up and down and maybe charge for that service, the property owners might love it because it might relieve them. And we wouldn't do it all the time, but if we even just did it once or twice a year, it might be a plus. And then at the same time, maybe we spray those weeds come weed season that pop up in our along our arterial streets. So anyway, I throw that out for further consideration someday. Councilmember Purington?
Chris, I know that Main Street is state highway, but doesn't the city have some sort of an agreement with them that we maintain those roads, kind of like we do downtown? What is it, Montana or whatever it is that is also state? Don't we maintain that?
No, we certainly have a good working relationship with Montana Department of Transportation, where there's some trade-off on things, but generally, if it's a state highway, which that is, MDT is the primary responsible party. Now, when you're talking about sidewalks, and this has bothered every city in town in Montana, those of us who have resources to make this voice heard to MDT, they have consistently washed their hands of the sidewalk pedestrian sides of their transportation network for decades and continue to. They will do everything in their agreements to try to make it very clear they are not in the sidewalk business. They're not in the pedestrian business. They are in moving cars down roads. And so, yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, this is just a code enforcement issue, is that correct? And so anyone who is walking along the sidewalk and the sidewalk has hazard on it, they would just report that to code enforcement. Code enforcement would have to let the property owner know that there's a hazard there. And if for instance, if Mayor mentioned Grand Avenue, if someone reported that, a code enforcement officer today would see those 100 property owners down there, and he would cite each 100 property owners saying, hey, your sidewalk, or at least warn them or whatever they do to clean off the sidewalks. Isn't that the current process now?
For snow, but I don't know that there's any regulations on the books. I doubt it, frankly, relative to keeping your sidewalk swept or clean outside of snow removal.
Clear.
Or cleared.
Right.
And safe. So, yeah, I think the mayor's concept is certainly probably the most efficient way to do it. It also it costs dollars. So whether it's a business improvement district that does it, so in the downtown, you have some more collaboration where they have business improvement district or homeowners, or when it comes budget time for us, talking about collective ways, either as sample projects or across bigger units like arterials, how to do that more uniformly. And it's certainly possible. It's a matter of resources.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're still in public comment on this item. So is there any other public comment on item number 2, the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee update? Don't see anybody, nobody online, so we'll close the public comment period. Anything else, Council, before we move on to item number 3, council retreat preparation? Don't see anything. So Chris, our council retreat, as I think everybody knows, is coming up March 31st, Friday afternoon, and April 1st in the morning, Saturday morning. So what do you have for us?
That's correct. So thank you. Several of you have given us various feedbacks. I'm going to hit it at a pretty high level because it isn't going to be very productive if 12 or 13 or 14 of us try to write an agenda. I have agendas. I'm very grateful for the work that Karen Baumgartner-Miller and Michelle, and I'm missing her last name. It's a team from Kaleidoscope is their group. I'm excited of what they've put together for us following these three desired outcomes or really primary subjects. So the retreat will focus on safety. I mean, that is our primary, public safety, that continues to be and has over the past several years and will continue into the future. Along that line, kind of jumping to the end, as I've shared with you and our community, I'm certainly learning how, frankly, inseparable the health and safety go hand in hand. So Friday's conversation predominantly is going to be around advancing the work that the council adopted last spring around increasing our investments in parks, trails, recreation, in making decisions relative to what, if anything, will be going in front of the voters here in 2023. Now, just kind of interesting, last week, while doing orientation with our latest set of hires, one of our new hires who just relocated out of Arizona was one who got a call from Trust for Public Land in a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce and other community leaders, is doing a poll. I don't know if they're done yet, but the data for that poll, we are anticipating, hoping by the end of this week, and will help inform us at that retreat. That'll be statistically valid information that just will be used to help in making those decisions. As a reminder, we said a year ago, we were going to figure out what we were going to invest on the capital side of parks, trails, recreation, and we all know that we've got in 2025 an operational issue relative to the fact that a third of our funding of the $10 million, I'm rounding numbers, of the $10 million we spend in parks, recreation, et cetera, a third of that funding comes from Park District 1, and Park District 1 sunsets in 2025. So first is to dive into and advance, and in a perfect world, walk out of that retreat with some strong recommendations, or I hesitate to use the word decisions because no final decisions can be made at the retreat, just like no final decisions can be made this evening. But we have for the April 17th City Council meeting follow-ups to our retreat if we are in a position to make decisions on April 17th. Second topic goes right to the core of safety and improving safety and understanding what our criminal justice system, how it is working with the public safety levies, how it is interfacing with other components for not only law enforcement, but crime reduction. And then frankly, I think the broader, wider conversation over dinner Friday night and teeing us up for Saturday's discussion is going to be a lot about crime prevention and whether we as a community, though it is not squarely a city departmental responsibility, we recognize that if we're going to tackle our crime problem, we've got to get way further upstream in dealing with what I'm learning about trauma, leading to substance abuse, leading to crime. So some homework. So, what we hope to walk out of there with is increased alignment and consensus on the action plans and strategies for investing in parks, trails, cultural amenities, and improving the safety of Billings. Some homework, prep work that all of you could do that would be helpful. These are all existing documents that we have, right? So we've got the 2017 comprehensive plan for parks and trails. That document is a foundational document that the city uses and that a working group has been spending a fair amount of time over this past year working on to make a set of recommendations. So I would skim over, read how much of that detail you want and have time for, but I would look at that comprehensive plan and remind yourselves of what is in that. That predates me by just a couple years, but one of the worst things we can do in local government is create a plan, spend all the time and energy to engage our community and get new administrators and new elected officials, and they don't pay any attention to all the work that was done. So I'd pull that out. I'd review what you don't have yet. You should have an annual report from the fire department and the police department in the upcoming week to 10 days prior to the retreat. And that'll just be a good refresher, of what's going on there. And as you recall, both of those reports, and I'm timed out here, is that you got as much as a decade of information in some of that in history, which I think is very helpful. Get this to open, please. Nice. Okay, so, yes, reopen. Okay, here we go. So review the 2017 plan, review those annual reports, some excellent resources that actually 2 of the 3 that I'm going to name came to me from council members, the third one from a leader in our community. If you have the time or make the time, The Deepest Well. I've pushed this out in the past, but The Deepest Well, it's a book. Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. Now, you won't probably have, I don't know how fast you read, or you want to read it, whether you want to go out on YouTube, plenty of presentations she has given on her research, or you can go to TED Talks and you can watch a TED Talk. So that is an excellent resource on the issues of adverse childhood events, ACEs. And it's foundational to the work that's going on at Riverstone, in our schools, and across our country. I would take a look at that resource because it really gets upstream to kind of root causes. Uneasy Peace by Patrick Sharkey. It's about public safety. Gives an excellent history of public safety in the United States over the past 50, 60 years. And what I think it identified, I might be off by a year or two, of statistically how this country reached its highest point of safety or lowest point of violent crime in about 2016, 2017. But now has seen a pretty steady increase there. That was a good resource. Got into issues like, and gave a number of examples around the country where business improvement districts and other tools were used to create smaller kind of groups tackling issues in their neighborhoods, business districts, things like that. So that was an Uneasy Peace by Patrick Sharkey. And then this third one was handed to me by our leader at the Boys and Girls Club, Hope Rising. And Hope Rising, I found to be an excellent resource, and it really frankly tied into both the Deepest Well and ACE's work, as well as just how important it is for folks, for all of us to have hope, meaningful hope. And there's a science behind it. It's not just it matters. So some questions that have led into the retreat by a number of folks who we've been meeting with, spent probably 6 or 7 hours so far. All these folks have been invited to the retreat to participate, particularly over dinner Friday and Saturday. Do we recognize that our crime problem is rooted in a substance abuse and a trauma? And that's not to say anybody who's been traumatized as a child or individual is necessarily going to be or becomes a substance abuse user or a criminal, but there definitely appears to be an awful lot of tie the other direction. So if we're really going to get root causes, I ask you to think about those things, and as you look at these resources, think about that. As I said in the beginning, to improve the safety of Billings requires that we improve the health of our citizens, would be one of the components that I've come to understand. Now, how does a city organization do that? That is really tough, challenging work. But I think we know we are all talking about these issues in various circles. We know our constituents and our citizens are looking at us as leaders in our community, as well as other groups and entities in our community. And so I think some of the toughest work we'll do is potentially set some goals and strategies around prevention, recognizing if a majority of the council wants to go there, a whole lot of that work is not squarely the city's. But if it's not ours as leaders to set the goals and set out a vision, then whose is it? Unfortunately, what did we witness this weekend? You know, an individual who, at least according to reports in the press conference, dealing with serious mental health problems, and we end up in a 14-hour standoff with an officer who's shot, who's, you know, the weapon that was being used went through the ballistic shield and just went underneath of, it appears, the body armor, to end up putting this person immediately, you know, in the emergency room and into surgeries on Saturday and Sunday. And thankfully, it looks like he is going to recover. I hope he'll recover mentally as well as physically so that he can come back to serve our community. But I realize it's just one example, but unfortunately, we can't say it's the only example in the past several years or decade in Billings. It's become an all too common. So that's the tie together I would have. I could try to push some of this out to you by name so you see it in an email so that you can tie back to some of these resources. Some of the invites we've made, I'm sorry, we've invited, Judge Harada had an emergency hearing this morning, so she and I are still playing tag with each other. Judge Harada has been invited to join us over dinner and some group discussions, and on Saturday as well. Judge Kolar is a part of our organization and team. I've made, though, kind of reached out to her, and she said she will be available and be present. We've got folks, I need to confirm in my 100 emails I haven't gotten to today, who we have confirmed from Riverstone. I'm expecting at least one or two with John and one of his colleagues, Rimrock, School District 2, and Substance Abuse Connect. So that's kind of a preview of things that, none of that is new, none of that's a surprise, I think, to any of you, but just kind of a preview of the really challenging work we have to do over a couple of days there on Friday and Saturday.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Anything before we go to public comment on this item? Don't see anything. So if anybody would like to comment on the council retreat prep item, please come forward. No one is online, no one is coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period, and that wraps that. So we'll go to item number 4, legislative session update. Chris, my understanding is that we would turn this over to members of our legislative committee, starting with the chair, Councilmember Neese. You chair that committee, so we'll turn it over to you. I just want to preface this by thanking the committee for their work during this legislative session. They may be regretting having added their name to that list. It's certainly a lot to do, but we do appreciate all the work of the committee. Also signal out Councilmember Purington, just in the last 24 hours, her work on Senate Bill 262 in corralling some comment for legislators on that hearing this morning, and I don't know if we have a report on the results of that, if anybody was tuning in. But with that, I'm going to just turn it over to Councilmember Neese, and then Councilmember Neese, you can turn it over to other members of the committee.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, we were, the process, we're going to actually let Chris say a few words. He would turn it over to me, and then we'll let the members speak.
And that's good too. Chris?
So to start with, each of the agendas, and I guess I'll just look from a nod from you guys. So each of the agendas from here through the end of the session, both work session and council meetings, we've put a placeholder of legislative update on. We know in the final weeks of the session, things will heat up, and frankly, the impact or the potential impact of actions in Helena having on us, I think, go up pretty steeply. So as long as you're good with it, it's the final or second to last agenda item coming forward. For tonight, I did get a chance to talk to Roy this morning, so he wouldn't be surprised, and he did let me know he was not, with his schedule, going to be able to kind of kick things off. And I don't formally, frankly, have much. There've been a lot of activity. Councilmember Purinton, all of you on the committee, it has helped myself and staff tremendously, this group. I think the group sees, though, the frustration that can take place and the fury of activity. And so I think we'll get better at this when we get to the next session 2 years from now. But having 5 more eyes and ears directly involved, picking up the phone, talking to legislators, not only in our own neighborhood, but even tapping into relationships around the state of Montana is invaluable. And you can't really quantify it totally, but it is invaluable. So I think to that end, it has been very helpful. This week, probably the biggest thing we directly have, or one of those, is former Councilman Yakowicz's bill is being heard Wednesday afternoon, requesting that increase on our behalf for the reimbursement. I think maybe I'm wrong, either Wednesday or Thursday at 3 in front of Senate local government. So I'm getting confirmed that we've got Tina Hoger. I think she's certainly our subject matter expert who would be best to be at the hearing to answer questions if they've got them. And then we're working behind the scenes and talking with folks there. I'll highlight that one for this week and frankly turn over if anybody on the committee has anything that they'd like to add.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. And Chris, yes, the committee, and thank you, council members, to formulating these committees. I think this has been a great move on the part of the council to get involved in things like this. Chris, I have to say thank you to your staff. They have been invaluable for us on the committee. They've jumped in, they're the experts on this, and they've been able to provide some information to us. It's been great to see how our connections with local legislators have been able to help staff as well to be able to connect and bring some of the ideas together between the legislators and the staff, and so that we can have a really good, more unified front on some of the bills. So this has been a great experiment. It's working. It needs some adjustments. We initially were going to meet a couple, every other week. We initially then quickly moved it to weekly. We could meet 3 times a week, maybe daily. However, a lot of us, I think we all work, and so we do have to earn a living. It is something that I think that has been very good. We've had a lot more input from the community. One of the members here that, as far as a piece of legislation going through, started with Sean right there, and so it came to the committee and it went through and through our legislators, and that's going to be here. It's actually, he just updated me on it's going to pass it passed the judicial, and it'll be going on to the floor of the Senate for vote. So that's the methamphetamine reporting. So this committee has been working. It works well. I can't thank the members enough because there is so many bills that we are looking at, and they remember the numbers better than I do. I remember some of the numbers that I have been working on, but all these other numbers they throw out, and it's like, can you kind of tell me, give me a hint of what that number is? And then we can move on. So there's not enough. Again, I could probably talk a lot about the thank yous, but they've done it. And it's a lot of work. I think we're moving in a good right direction. We don't always agree on everything, which is okay. I think we find some good compromise, and we hear from each other on this, and then we move forward on that. So it's been a great experiment. I look forward to continuing this and these updates that we'll be getting. So. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to the other committee members.
That'd be great. So we'll go to the other committee members. Just for anybody who might be listening, Senator or Representative Yakowicz's House Bill 534 is on Wednesday, but it's Wednesday, March 29th. at 3 o'clock. So about 10 days from now, 9 days from now. That's according to his email from this morning. So, Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I won't belabor a gigantic list of bills because that's what we do on Wednesdays. So if you would like that gigantic list of bills, come to our committee meeting. But I wanted to say I wasn't there this last week, but the week before, we had 3 legislators come they were on transmittal break and they came to our committee. And I found that to be one of the most helpful meetings we have had. And it really made me start thinking that that's the kind of work that I would love to see the committee doing in the off season, is meeting with them, talking with them. Because I mean, they're trying to do good things in Helena, but sometimes they don't understand how that lines up with local government or the unintended consequences of some of the things they're proposing. And so the more conversations we have like that, I think the more bills that we will like coming out of what they're proposing is my hope. So I just want to put that plug out there that I think the relationships that we build with the legislators is a really important piece of what this committee can do in the future.
Very good. Thank you. Other members of the committee? Councilmember Purington?
Well, thank you. I think we need a raise. That's one thing.
We'll double your supplement on this item.
Absolutely. There is something on Thursday, and I can't remember what it is, so I'll look and see what that one is. And it's something that we need to, it's 262, isn't it? The one for
later this week.
yeah. So I guess one of the issues, I went back through that list of bills that we have for consideration, and actually, Councilmember Rups has kind of brought it back to my head to go through some of these items that we're looking at, because I think that was the one thing that we said on this legislative committee, is that we would look at the city's priorities. So many of these bills don't have anything to do with our priorities. So I think some of these we can scratch. But, and Chris, this is a question that I have for you, because as I go through, our weekly summary from our lobbyist, there's so many bills on there that have nothing to do with the city of Billings. Some of them already have a support on those and we hadn't even looked at them. Some of them have an opposition to them. So I'm not sure how they have been directed to support and oppose those bills. So I think some of these we need to, that's one of the lists that I went through to conjure up the list that I gave to our committee members last evening. One of the other things that concerns me, because these bills are going through so quickly, and part of it's not a resolution, our bylaws, is that really the committee cannot oppose or support bills without full counsel, other than, we did change that, so we can do that.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead.
So yes, we changed our rules as long as the bill and our reasoning for supporting or opposing actually supports the resolution that the council passed in regards to what the priorities of the council were. And so you're right. If it's not within the purview of the priorities, then it's not something that we can take a position on unless we want to bring it to council and vote on it. But if it's addressed by that resolution the council already addressed, then we can.
So just as a quick update, as far as I know, almost every public safety bill that has been presented to this point that we're familiar with, the city is supporting those. The only one that we have been opposing is, and I don't know that we're doing it as a committee yet, is the Sheriff's First Act. So I think there's still one on that hasn't, I heard that all of them died, but I think there's still one on. And so that's one that I'm still concerned about, and it's Senate Bill 272. And that's the one that our chief and the Chief of Police Association, there's other groups that are opposing that. So I think we need to look at that one more. The other one, there's a lot of housing and land use, primarily land use. And those are getting so confusing because they're just bits and pieces out there. When are they ever going to pull them together? And are they going to pull them together? And it really bothers me and this is where Chris and I kind of split hairs, is that I'm just not a total advocate of local control. Some are, but I do see where a lot of these local government, or what am I trying to say, land use bills, they're just kind of snipping away at what we've already got. And so I tried to get a hold of Representative Brewster today because I know he's hearing, I think that's the one that's on Thursday, is that House Local Government is hearing SB, whatever that one is, 262, yeah. And so I want to get his thoughts on that. And then we have some opposition from our planning department that we need to look at that, which I mentioned to you as well. I'm not sure that that opposition that the planning department is putting out there is probably the best. We need to be able to work with these legislators. And I think we need to have a little bit more of a conciliatory note if we do oppose, because the next thing you know, we're going to be supporting something. So we have to be, I think we have to be smart about our opposition and about our support of certain things. So I appreciate the work that everyone's doing on these. Roy, thank you for leading the charge. I'm so glad that you were blessed with that position. So there you go. But anyway, this is truly an experiment. I think the city of Billings is probably the closest one that's really getting truly involved. I mean, the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Purinton. Do you know what happened to Senate Bill 262 this morning? That was the Zolnikoff preemption bill on local licensing, if there was some sort of a state license out there. Do you know what happened to that?
This is terrible. As much as I worked on this stuff, I forgot about it this morning until it went on for an hour and a half just on that one bill. I got to the tail end of it, and from what I'm hearing from the committee members, they were also concerned whether, are you just talking about a professional license or are you talking about the business license? And so they're up in the air with this. They do see that work needs to be done on it. They're looking for a sponsor in the House, and no one raised their hand. So we'll see. I just think, because it's a very broad statement that's already added to what local governments cannot do, and that's what they're trying to add. And so it needs sideboards on it to differentiate whether it's businesses or professional licenses.
Thank you for that report. Yeah. Okay, Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm not on the committee, so maybe it isn't my turn to speak.
We're going to give you a chance anyway. It's your lucky day.
Thank you. I kind of think of the legislative session as staring at one of those little mirrored disco lights that's turning. You're like, oh my goodness. And then the deflection, and where is all this headed? It's very, very, and then you're like, well, maybe it's just smoke. Maybe I'm just looking through smoke and there's nothing actually happening through this fog, a legislative session. I appreciate the work that the committee is doing on that. I think that one of the things I've benefited from in this legislative session is that I have some resources of people who have made little tiny short videos that say, this week at the legislature. And they're only tracking bills that are of interest to them. But it kind of, if you could actually know which ones are important, which ones are going to fail right away, and to just keep track of the ones that have a possibility, your job would be so much easier. And then I'm like, is this by design or is this by accident that we have so many bills that aren't going to make it? There's no way they're going to make it, but still you have to watch them. So I appreciate the work you're doing, and I think that's why I asked Senator Friedel about the legal notes and the fiscal notes that are with, not every bill has those, but those that do, because it sort of seems like if your advice from your own people is, this thing isn't going to fly through a court, why would you do it? Or, this bill is so expensive that going through a reconciliation on this through the House and the Senate is going to be really difficult. If they think that, gosh, I'd probably just decide to do something else with my time and not try to pursue those bills. But anyway, that's how the legislature works. But I just wanted to say I thank you for your work, and it's a lot of hard work, and it's very confusing. And I think we only have this is halfway mark, so we'll be over soon, whatever happens. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Anything further on this item? Councilmember Gulick?
Yes, also appreciate all the service you guys have been doing on the committee. I'll be interested to hear, at the end of the session, sort of lessons learned, sort of reflecting on what you do differently so that the next wave of people can learn from that. But I think also we should hear from legislators. I suspect those who've had contact with y'all have. Well, I'd be interested to hear whether or not how they interact with the city has been different because of your involvement. I have to imagine it's the case, but if they have suggestions as well, I think we should get their voices as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Don't see any other hands, so we'll open up for public comment on item number 4. Any public comment on the legislative update? No one's online, no one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Chris, highlights of upcoming agenda items.
So before I go there, I'll just take this window. I didn't take it earlier. So red light cameras, that was a discussion. That's not going to happen, right? In the past 30 days, Met Transit buses have been T-boned 3 times by red light runners.
Say that again. What was the time period?
So I think that's in the past 30 days. Maybe 30 days. So 3 buses have been T-boned, 2 uninsured, 1 insured. So the taxpayers are in the end who's picking up the tab on this stuff. So I asked Rusty as he did his budget presentation.
And I'm sorry, when you say insured, you don't mean the city doesn't have insurance,
Thank you.
the offending driver does not have liability.
Sorry. Yes, the individual who
coverage.
ran the red light and hit the public vehicle does not have insurance out of 2 of the 3. So I asked them, let's keep track of this. Let's use that communication with you guys and our legislators as our taxpayers end up having to pay more money for what technology really could help us with and behavior. The idea of technology for enforcement, I've never been in a serious conversation over the past decade about that as a revenue source. The conversation has always been about how to improve safety in the most efficient way possible. So just a little tidbit there for next week. So we've got a zoning change that is coming before you, not anticipated to be controversial, work pretty smoothly. But sure, famous last words, right? And then just because there's not a ton of stuff on the regular side of the agenda, our local ordinance that regulates weapons inside of public buildings, that update is coming through to be consistent with what the legislature did in 2021. So that'll be on your agenda. And then there's the typical things on consent. So nothing too big to flag there for a week from tonight. And I will stop there.
Okay. If there are any Councilmember Tidswell.
Chris, are our buses or our transit buses equipped with cameras? Either rear view, facing, front?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Councilmember Puritan?
I will say that one of our legislators had said that, I think it's in Europe, that they have those flashing red lights, they flash, or the green light flashes before they turn, kind of like on Laurel Highway, there's that one yellow light that flashes because of the speed. And so I asked Debbie if our lights have that type of software that it could do that. because it might possibly, slow the traffic down, it's that precursor sort of things and getting ready to change. She said, nope, they don't do that here, so.
In the speculation on this side, and I say speculation, I haven't seen the actual footage of them, is they were bad enough. These weren't run yellows. They were flat out T-bones in the middle of an intersection. So you're talking about someone who is distracted. They, didn't see a bus in the middle of the intersection.
And the data is very good that when you have cameras that catch you, gee, what a surprise. People stop running the red lights. They're very, very effective. So, okay, that concludes. Do we have any public comment on item number 5? No. Close that. And we'll move on. Any items of general council discussion? Councilmember Neese?
Yes, just a quick follow-up on some of our conversation tonight about sidewalks. It is in our ordinance to not only remove snow, but any kind of, as it puts it here, impediment that accumulates thereon and prevents the continuance and accumulation of snow, ice, slush, or other impediments that accumulate thereon. So, yes, rocks, it has to be clear for those type of stuff. It has to be convenient for foot traffic. And they have 24 hours to clean it up. So it is a code enforcement issue that someone who sees that and has trouble, just file a code enforcement report, and code enforcement will go out there and let the property owner know to follow the ordinance. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anything else on that score? Okay, public comment on non-agenda items.
Hi, Sean Callahan, Dorothy Lane. I just should have came up earlier. I just wanted to send a special thanks to Councilmember Neese for all your help and support, and especially with the bill, getting the bill passed and the right connections and everything else. So thank you. And also, now that we know that about code enforcement, it looks like they have some job security coming. So thank you.
Yeah, we wish they didn't, but I'm afraid they do, yes. Okay, any other public comment on non-agenda items? There is none, so that is closed, and council, we are adjourned, and I just want to point out it is 7:27.